President, Your Excellencies, my lords, ladies, and gentlemen, the praise silence for the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Neville Chamberlain, Member of Parliament.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, my lords, ladies, and gentlemen, some of us, as year by year we grow older, look forward to our coming birthdays with mixed feelings. And, Mr. President, I could not help a certain feeling of envy as I listened to your account of the ease with which you in this association are able to fix your birthdays when you like. I am proud indeed that you have finally fixed the celebration of your 50th anniversary on a day in which it was possible for me to be present. And I am not only proud, but I am flattered, and my country is flattered by your generous words and by the cordiality of the response which this very distinguished company has made to the toast which you have just proposed. But if I am to lay bare the secrets of my soul, and that is, of course, what you would expect of me tonight, I must confess that I would face all the dictators of the world with less apprehension than I do this nameless power which we call the press, and which conveys our words to every corner of the globe with unimpeachable accuracy. But yet, with such variation of effect that no two reports seem to be alike. This is a formidable power that you wield. But I frankly admit that we who carry the responsibility of state administration can no more dispense with your services than you can dispense with ours, who furnish you with so much of your daily food. And I gratefully acknowledge that if sometimes your zeal for furnishing the public with stimulating information causes us a little embarrassment, on the other hand, I've seldom, if ever, known a case where a confidence has been deliberately betrayed. Tonight, I have nothing startling to say to you, and nothing confidential. On the contrary, I welcome the opportunity of saying to you and to the much larger audience which I am told is listening to me some things which I have said before on other occasions, but which I think will bear repeating, because memories are short. In days, in which great events succeed one another with such rapidity that it is difficult to keep a proper perspective. What I have to say to you tonight concerns, as is natural in speaking to the foreign press, the aims and the actions of the British government in relation to foreign affairs since I entered upon my present office in the summer of last year. With the exception of the period of the Great War, I doubt if any of my predecessors during the last 100 years has had to contend with more trying and anxious conditions than we have encountered during the last 18 months. And it would be too much to expect that anyone in my position, forced by circumstances over which he has no control, continually to walk through dark and perilous ways, should escape criticism from those who think they see clearer or further than I. But since, for the time being, the responsibility for guidance rests upon my shoulders, I am bound to discharge it to the best of my ability in the light of the conditions as I see them. For if I were ultimately to fail, there would be little consolation for me or for anyone else in being able to say that I had followed the advice of others instead of relying upon my own judgment. Now, my aim has been consistently the same from beginning to end. Faced with a situation in which the relations between this country on the one hand and Germany and Italy on the other were rapidly deteriorating and thereby steadily destroying the confidence of Europe in the maintenance of peace, it seemed to me that there were only two alternatives before us. One was and to make up our minds that war was inevitable and to throw the whole energies of the country into preparations to meet it. The other was to make a prolonged and determined effort to find out, if possible, the causes of war, and by trying out the results of personal contact and discussion, to endeavor to remove them, while at the same time steadily proceeding with such rearmament as was necessary to restore that defensive power which we had voluntarily abandoned over a period of years. Ladies and gentlemen, there were some who sincerely believed that the first course was the one we ought to take. I don't think there are more than a minority in this country. I did not take that view then, And I do not take it now. A war today is fundamentally different from all the wars of the past, inasmuch as its first and its most numerous victims would not be the professional fighters, but the civilian population, the workman, the clerk, the housewife, and most horrible of all, the children. And when the war was over, whoever was the victor, it would leave behind a trail of suffering and loss that 2 generations would not obliterate. And it sows the dragon's teeth, which are the seeds of fresh quarrels, fresh injustices, and fresh conflicts. Such consequences are not likely to be incurred. They ought never to be incurred unless we can be satisfied and our peoples can be satisfied that every honorable alternative has been tried and is found to be impracticable. It was with these considerations in my mind that I chose the second course. And my object has never wavered. The goal is not only peace, but confidence that peace can be maintained. I never expected that that goal could be attained in the twinkling of an eye without checks, disappointments, and setbacks. And I've had them all. Perhaps in greater measure than I had hoped or anticipated. But I am not disheartened. Nor deterred by these passing phases. It has been well said that failure only begins when you leave off trying to succeed. As long as I am where I am, I will never leave off trying. And when I look back over the past year, I am astonished at the pessimism of some of our critics. They profess, and I'm sure their profession is made in all sincerity, that they too desire peace above all things. But if you want peace, you must seek and ensue it. You must take positive and active steps to remove what threatens peace. And the British government, in pursuit of its aim, has been active during this year and it has not been unsuccessful. Let me remind you of the agreements that stand out like milestones as the year has gone by. In April, we made the agreement between the United Kingdom and Era, an agreement which put an end to that long and bitter struggle between our two countries. In the same month, we concluded the Anglo-Italian agreement, and thus we closed the breach which unhappily for a time had interrupted our old and traditional friendship. In September, there came the Munich Agreement, followed by the Anglo-German Declaration, and in due course, that led up to the complementary Franco-German Declaration, which was signed only a few days ago. And lastly, I would mention the Anglo-American Trade Agreement. Because although that is primarily a commercial treaty, yet I regard it as symbolic of the good relations which so happily exist between the United States of America and this country. Here then, in a little less than 12 months, are 5 major agreements, 3 of which were concluded between democratic and dictator states. Surely that is a cause for satisfaction rather than pessimism, and surely it is something which should encourage us to persist in a policy which has already given us such results. Of course, I am well aware that in some quarters the Munich Agreement has been described not as an example of cooperation, but as a defeat for democracies. Seems to me curious that that description should come from men who are proud to call themselves Democrats. I cannot help feeling that such pronouncements do no service to democracy or to the cause of international cooperation. For in my view, we should not seek to assess the results of such meetings in terms of victory or defeat. We should rather remember what was the alternative which was averted by the Munich Agreement. That alternative would have been an attempt to revise the Versailles Treaty by force instead of by discussion. An attempt which, whatever its result, would have produced a condition of affairs very different from the atmosphere in which we are peacefully dining tonight. But, ladies and gentlemen, there were other results which followed upon the Munich Agreement. Besides the settlement of the Czechoslovak frontier. In September last, the peoples of 4 great countries, France, Germany, Italy, and ourselves, found themselves face to face with the imminent realities of war. In imagination, they saw husbands, brothers, sons, torn from the side of their families, perhaps never to return. They saw their homes wrecked, their children terrified or mutilated, their peace of mind, their happiness gone forever. Do you think that those days have been forgotten? I do not believe it. I must deplore the recent attitude of the German press, which in one case hasn't scrupled to pour out its vituperation against our most respected statesman, himself only recently the Prime Minister of this country. Which in few cases has shown much desire to understand our point of view. Nevertheless, I am convinced that the wish of our 2 peoples remains still what it was recorded to be in the Munich Declaration, namely, never to go to war with one another again, and to settle any difference that might arise between us by the method of consultation. Mr. President, in the days when the League of Nations was at the height of its prestige, I always thought that one of its most valuable features was the opportunity which it gave the ministers of the various members of the League to establish personal contact with one another at their periodical meetings in Geneva. Today, those opportunities are sadly limited. And if these personal contacts, so indispensable for a good understanding, are still to be effective, then some other means must be sought. Next month, Lord Halifax and I have planned a visit to Rome. For the purpose of discussing with the head of the Italian government and his ministers all matters of common interest and concern. It may be that once again some will speculate as to who is to be the winner and who the loser in these talks. But that is not the spirit in which we propose to undertake our journey. Rather, is it our hope that we may find in Rome an atmosphere in which it will be possible, by personal interchange of thoughts, better to understand each other's point of view, and by establishing a greater mutual confidence between us, to cooperate in further steps towards a general sense of stability and security. And that brings me to another point. All my political life, I have been a party man, and I've taken my full share of the knocks which in this country are the inevitable accompaniment of party conflict. But ladies and gentlemen, no one could pass through the experiences which have fallen to my lot in recent months without feeling that the narrower aspects of party controversy have lost much of their savor and much of their importance. And so too, I find it difficult to raise much excitement over different systems of government, apart, that is, from the actions of government which may or may not necessarily be inherent in the system. But I am told that in some quarters it is suggested that because I advocate an understanding, a better understanding with dictator countries, I must necessarily favor the system of Nazism or fascism. But if that means that I favor such a system for my own country, the exact contrary is the case. To me, and as I believe to the vast majority of my countrymen, the subordination of individual independence to something which is called the state, but which really means only those who for the time being rule the state, is insupportable, because it runs counter to all our most fundamental conceptions of the proper framework of human society. But of course, I recognize that these ideas are not universally held, and it seems to me to be neither useful nor desirable to criticize others because they prefer systems which certainly do not suit us, but which do suit them. There's one other observation that I would make, and it is this, that history teaches us that no form of government ever remains the same. The change may be slow, it may come by degrees, or it may come suddenly like an explosion. But change in one form or another is inevitable. And it seems to follow from that we should be careful not to cut ourselves off from contact with any country because of a system which may well, in course of time, undergo modifications which may render it very different from what it appears today. Now let me turn to another aspect of British policy, that which concerns our military preparations. You gentlemen, whose business it is to watch and to report upon the trend of opinion in this country, cannot fail to have noticed that whilst there may be differences of opinion here as to the methods of carrying out our aims in foreign policy, there is practical unanimity upon the necessity of pushing forward the progress of our program of arms. That program was originally designed to be carried through in 5 years, of which 3 have already gone by. From the beginning, we made it clear that it was to be flexible and that it would have to be modified from time to time to suit changing conditions. Well, it has in fact been modified in 2 directions. It has been accelerated and it has been expanded. And those modifications have demanded very considerable efforts from industry, from labor, from the taxpayer, and from the individual whose time and whose services were called for. So far from resenting these demands, the people of this country have shown unmistakably that they are ready to make even greater efforts if it were thought necessary to call for them. Now, is this attitude on the part of our people to be considered as evidence that they are warm-minded? Not in the least. It is their hope that these armaments will never be used. Certainly, they will never be required for purposes of aggression. But while we hear so much talk about the advantages of force, while we see others accumulating force and making little or no response to suggestions for disarmament, we are bound to take all the steps that are necessary to fill any deficiencies which may exist in our defenses. For while I hope that we shall always be ready to discuss in a reasonable spirit any grievances or any injustices which may be alleged to exist, It is to reason that we are prepared to listen and not to false. Nor can we forget our obligations, not only to our own people at home, but to all those throughout the British Empire for whom we are responsible, and to our allies to whom we are bound by treaty. Those obligations we must be ready to fulfill, and our preparations are now so far advanced that we can say with confidence that we are in a position to do so. Let me repeat once again what I have said before. There is no one who recognizes more clearly than I that this process of piling up armaments must in time exhaust the resources even of the wealthiest nation. And therefore, there is no one who would more gladly than I enter into an international arrangement for the reduction or the limitation of armaments all around by mutual agreement between the nations. Mr. President, more than once during recent weeks, I have sustained a certain shock in seeing myself described as that old man. Certainly, I'm not conscious or unduly conscious of the approach of old age. Either in my physical or my mental powers. But there is perhaps one respect in which the passage of years has left its mark upon me. And that is in the recognition that has come to me of the futility of ambition if ambition leads to a desire for domination. Once again, history shows us that attempts at domination have never resulted in the happiness of the nations attempting it. There is an innate resistant force which arises out of the fear of loss of liberty and the passionate desire for national self-expression, which renders domination precarious and uncertain. And so it seems to me that happiness of nations must be sought in other directions. Something, no doubt, depends upon material conditions, upon our ability to command that standard of comfort which each one sets for himself. But even more, are we dependent for our happiness upon our mental condition, upon our freedom from apprehension, upon our possession of that peace of mind without which no material comforts can bring satisfaction. And it is the absence of that peace of mind which weighs upon the world today. And in turn, by destroying confidence, prevents us from reaping those material advantages which human progress in mastering the forces of nature should entitle us to enjoy. And so, I would conclude by appealing through you to all the nations whom you represent to realize that our aim ought to be the happiness of all our peoples, and that happiness can only be attained if we are willing to lay aside our suspicions and our prejudices, to cease looking for points of difference and to search instead for points of agreement. Not many generations have passed since we were at war with the United States of America. Today, such a conflict has gone far beyond the bounds of possibility. In my own lifetime, we were within an ace of war with France. Today, such a catastrophe seems as remote as war with America. Indeed, our relations with France are so close that they go far beyond merely legal obligations. They are founded on identity of interest. If then we have already succeeded in reducing the field of possible war so far, is there any reason why we should not carry our efforts further still until we can attain such general security that we can lay aside our weapons and devote ourselves to the benefit of the human race? For my part, great as may be the obstacles, dark as may be the outlook in certain respects, I believe that that goal can be attained, provided that we keep our courage firm, our purpose undaunted, and our faith untarnished.